Hey everybody, welcome back to the Imaginarium. It's 1 o'clock. We're running this like a tight ship. Alright, my name's Tom, welcome back. I'm just here to fill in some gaps when Dave is out hawking his wares at the town square in Bushnell. He's been selling his memorabilia down there, keeping it nice and cool. I'm kidding. He just stepped away for a little bit. Anyway, Sharon Autenrieth is going to come up and continue her series in Joss Whedon, the universe thereof. And some of you may not have been here. Who was here yesterday? But we have, okay, good. We have a few new people too. She tells me she's from Marysville, Illinois. Maryville.
One Mary, not two.
She's an associate pastor and a homeschool mom. And that's something we all can relate to, right? Yeah. So it's a really great resume. And she's going to continue her talks. Dave wants me to let you guys know tonight. Who here knows who's coming here tonight at 8 o'clock?
Could it be Steve Taylor?
Some of you may not know. His name is Steve Taylor. He's a definitive popular Christian music artist from the 80s, 90s. Producer, now film director. He started in film actually. But his movie is Brew Like Jazz. So if you haven't seen it, we're going to actually have Steve host a movie night. He's going to talk about his film, come and meet you. And let me ask just a favor, if you're going to come out for this, it would be helpful if you would, I think it'll be such that we can use chairs from over there. We're going to have about 200 chairs. So come in, come early if you can, fill in the middle, and we're going to have people all over the place. Because some of you want to see this movie, some of you just want to meet Steve. It's going to be a big night. So come back at 8 o'clock. There's a movie on after that, and it's in the sheet. There's a detailed sheet of the movies, and I'll try to find those so you guys can come up and get one. So lots of great stuff. The Imaginarium this week. Oh, okay. Be sure to get one of these. Let's hear it for Sharon.
Hi, it's good to see you all again. I hope you are staying hydrated and surviving the week and enjoying it. A couple things I want to mention as we start. Firstly, as you can see, we don't have light for clips, but we're still trying to use the audio. I mentioned this yesterday. In the clips I'm using, the dialogue is really where the meat is found. But it's so light. I mean, the person running the menu, I'm sure, is probably struggling to see what he's doing. So we'll see how it goes. As you know, we're going to give away some posters to people who can answer trivia questions. If you were here yesterday, you know that. Let's see. Wash is gone, River's gone, and Shepherd Book is gone. So those are off the table, claimed by the first three people that could answer the Whedon questions. So I'm going to start with one that's actually really hard. So I may grade on a curve. Can you all hear me? Also, when we run the clips, if you can't hear me well or can't hear the clips well enough, let us know. This is, as I said, this first question is Firefly question. It's a little tough, so if nobody can answer it completely, I may give it to someone who can get close. 5 of the main characters on Firefly, and by main characters I mean the crew of the Serenity, 5 of those actors have appeared as villains in other Whedon shows. Is there anyone who thinks they could name the 5, like what characters they play in other shows?
Mel?
Played?
The preacher?
Caleb, yes.
Zoe?
Played?
She was named after a flower, Jasmine.
Yeah.
Very good.
Wash?
Played?
The bad guy in Dollhouse?
Good enough. Alpha. I say I'm generous, right?
Can't think of the other 2.
Mel played Captain Hammer.
Well, that's true. I didn't even count Captain Hammer as a villain, but really he is. No, not Inara. I'm so hot, I'm even going to have trouble remembering. River plays, Summer Glau plays, anyone know, in Dollhouse?
In Dollhouse, he's the slime.
Yes. Bennett, who Topher brings in love with her, but really she's not a positive character. And one more. Oh crumb, I should have written them down so I couldn't forget. I may have to come back to it later. You may have to trust me in the meantime. Jane. Jane.
He's the liaison for Wolf.
That's right, very good. The last season of Angel, he's Hamilton, the liaison from the senior partners. Very good. However, I had committed beforehand anybody who could get 3 out of 5 would get it on that one, so you win. Okay, this should be a pretty easy one in this venue. Last year, Doug Jones was here as a special guest, and wonderful special guest. What role did he play on Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
One of the gentlemen in Hush.
Yes, very good. And you named the episode, so awesome.
He was one of what?
He was one of the gentlemen in the Hush episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is one there's almost no dialogue through the entire episode. And finally, an Angel question. Just before their last battle, season finale of Angel, he instructs the remaining members of his team to sort of go enjoy their last day. Does anyone remember what Spike does with his time?
Doesn't he go to poetry reading or something?
Yes, very good. He goes to a poetry slam.
And
Yes.
he reads his original poem, the one that everyone mocked him for when in the
Yes, for Cecily, where he rhymed effulgent and effulgent. Yes. And then goes on to recite a poem called The Wanton Folly of Me Mum. So, all right, so make sure and come up at the end and get your posters, you three. Very good. I had this great question after yesterday's session about, I talked about negative liberty and positive liberty, and negative liberty being kind of the idea, liberty from interference. Mal did not want to be meddled with. And someone essentially asked me the question, isn't there a place for a certain kind of meddling? I mean, isn't there some social contract required, some obligation that we owe to each other to keep, partly to keep things from sliding into chaos, or to address real injustice in this part of the world or other parts of the world? And that's a good question, because that philosophy, the non-interference taken to the extreme, leads us to ask, is Mal Reynolds Ayn Rand? No, Mal Reynolds is not Ayn Rand. Mal Reynolds does have a code that shapes how he treats other people, and it is not only rooted in his own self-interest or his own desire to be left alone. And the question reminded me that I had forgotten to say that in the third session, we're going to get away from the icons that Joss Whedon is shattering and move into his moral philosophy, because he does have one. It's not all a critique of what's wrong. He also has a universe that's very hopeful in a lot of ways, and a very high, kind of a high moral calling, I think, in the Whedonverse. So we will get to that. Today we are going to, yesterday we talked about the idols of institutional education and institutional power, particularly the government. Today we are going to get to something that's a little closer to home for a lot of us, the family and religion as an institution. If educational institutions are ineffective at best and corrupt and soul-destroying at worst, and if governments are oppressive and will retain their power by any means necessary, surely we can still put our confidence in the family. After all, the family is the first institution ordained by God, right? And we often hear in Christian culture that it is the foundation of civilization, the pillar of society. I come from homeschool world where it's in certain elements of that community, it's almost a fetish. The sacred bonds between husband and wife and parent and child, so precious, and the home is a sanctuary. But that picture of the family almost doesn't exist in the Whedonverse. I'm not sure any of our golden calves get a more ruthless gutting than the family of origin does in the Joss Whedon shows. They are full of crappy moms and even worse dads. And I'm not opposed to family. I've been married almost 25 years. I have 5 children. And I would point out, just because it raises obvious questions, Joss Whedon is a family man. He's been married for quite a long time. He has 2 children. He collaborates with his brothers Zach and Jed regularly, as he did on Dr. Horrible, and says his mother is the most the strongest influence on his life. He praises his mother to the heavens. His parents were divorced when he was young, and he says his childhood relationship with his father was kind of strange, but they've been reconciled. And his father, who was a comedy writer for television, he says that they have a good relationship, and his dad's proud of him. So I don't want us to read too much into him just working out his own family angst. I think the longer that I live, even though I am a family woman, the longer I live, the more I recognize how much pain occurs in families, how much we hurt each other in families, and how often that's hidden because it happens in the home. And it's easy for us to not acknowledge it and not deal with it. His harshest criticisms, Whedon's harshest, are directed at the patriarchy, the male-dominated family. And again, that's something I'm a little bit familiar with, coming from not just the church, but from the particular homeschool subculture. But he's not only concerned with that. In the same way that he critiqued both the liberal and the conservative kind of authoritarian models of education, he does the same thing with the family. So we're going to look at a couple moms first. Joyce Summers is Buffy's mom, the central mother figure in the Whedonverse, and she's not all bad. By any means, she's not all bad. But she's quite clueless for a long time. And she's kind of persists in her cluelessness past the point of all reason. And when she finally discovers that Buffy is a Slayer, even Buffy seems exasperated by that. And she says, "Open your eyes, Mom. What do you think has been going on for the last 2 years? The fights, the weird occurrences. How many times have you washed blood out of my clothes and you still haven't figured it out?" After that, Joyce tries to be supportive of Buffy's calling, but even there it's sort of inappropriate and childish. And you may remember there's an episode called Gingerbread, and we're going to watch a clip from that in a minute. She wants to support Buffy, to be involved in Buffy's patrolling, so she brings snacks while Buffy is out patrolling. And that leads to Joyce seeing the bodies of a couple of dead children, and she's completely emotionally unprepared for the ramifications of that. So in this episode, which echoes both the satanic panic that of the 80s, and Dave mentioned that in here yesterday, and also the conservative activism of groups like the Parents Television Council that was quite critical of Buffy, Joyce starts a group called Mothers Opposed to the Occult, Moo. And under their direction, censorship strikes Sunnydale High. This is when Snyder's the principal, so he is only too willing to cooperate. And he supervises as the police search the lockers of the students to look for occult paraphernalia. And of course they find it in Willow's case, because this is after Willow has become involved in witchcraft. And it's, you know, it's kind of a chilling scene, the goth kids who are suddenly under suspicion just because they're goth. And Snyder says this is a glorious day for principals everywhere. No pathetic whining about students' rights, just a long row of lockers and a man with a key. So Willow's supplies are confiscated, and they also confiscate Giles' very extensive collection of occult books, which they use, the Scoobies use. And in the scene that we're going to watch, we actually see two different mothers. Willow's mother confronting Willow about what has been discovered, and then Buffy going to talk to her mother about her role in what's taking place at the school. So,
oh, sit down, honey. Principal Snyder talked to you? Yes, he's quite concerned. Mom, I know what this looks like, and I can... Oh, you don't have to explain, honey. This isn't exactly a surprise. Why not? Oh, well, identification with mythical icons is perfectly typical of your age group. It's a classic adolescent response to the pressures of incipient adulthood. Of course, I wish you could have identified with something a little less icky, but developmentally speaking. Mom, I'm not an age group. I'm me. Willow. Oh, honey. I understand.
No, you don't. Mom, this may be hard for you to accept, but I can do stuff. Nothing bad or dangerous, but I can do spells.
You think you can, and that's what concerns me. The delusions.
Mom, how would you know what I can do? I mean, the last time we had a conversation over 3 minutes, it was about the patriarchal bias of the Mr. Rogers show.
Lesser puppets.
Mom, you're not paying attention.
And this is your way of trying to get it. Now, I have consulted with some of my colleagues, and they agree that this is a cry for discipline. You're grounded.
Grounded? This is the first time ever I've done something you don't like and I'm grounded? I'm supposed to mess up. I'm a teenager, remember?
You're upset. I hear you.
No, Ma, hear this. I'm a rebel. I'm having a rebellion.
Honey, you don't need to act out like this to prove your specialness.
No, I'm not acting out. I'm a witch. I can make pencils float. And I can summon the 4 elements. Okay, 2, but 4 soon. And I'm dating a musician. I worship Beelzebub. I do his biddings. Do you see any goats around? No, because I sacrifice them. Prince of Night, I summon you. Come fill me with your black, naughty evil.
Is that clear? Now, you will go to your room and stay there until I say otherwise. And we're going to make some changes. I don't want you hanging out with those friends of yours. It's clear where this little obsession came from. You will not speak to Bunny Summers again.
I don't want you seeing that Willow anymore. I've spoken with her mother. I had no idea her forays into the occult had gone so far.
You're the one who ordered the raid on the school today.
Honey, they opened a few lockers.
Lockers. First syllable lock. They're supposed to be private, and they took all of Giles' books away.
You'll get most of them back. Moo just wants to weed out the offensive material. Everything else will be returned to Mr. Giles soon.
If we're going to solve this, we need those books now.
Sweetie, those books have no place in a public school library, especially now. Any student can waltz in there and get all sorts of ideas. Do you understand how that terrifies me?
Mom, I hate that these people scared you so much. And I know that you're just trying to help, but you have to let me handle this. It's what I do.
But is it really? I mean, you patrol, you slay, evil pops up, you undo it, and that's great. But is Sunnydale getting any better? Are they running out of vampires?
I don't think that you've run out.
It's not your fault. You don't have a plan. You just react to things. It's bound to be kind of fruitless.
Okay, maybe I don't have a plan. Lord knows I don't have lapel buttons.
Buffy.
And maybe next time that the world is getting sucked into hell, I won't be able to stop it because the anti-hell sucking book isn't on the approved reading list.
I didn't mean to put down.
Well, you did. I have to go. I have to go on one of my pointless patrols and react to some vampires. If that's all right with you. A nice acronym, Mom. Those are both liberal, enlightened kind of moms. It's, I think, maybe the only time we see Willow's mom, who's an academic. You kind of get that sense there. And just very emotionally detached from Willow. In the same episode, Willow has said her mother's not interested in her extracurricular activities, and then she says, or my curricular activities either. Joyce, on the other hand, is a much more emotionally invested mother, but she often kind of role reverses with Buffy, and Buffy ends up trying to protect her and trying to comfort and console her when she's afraid. She's not equipped for life on the Hellmouth, as we've already said about some of the other characters. But there's another common thread that I want you to catch there, which is that they both kind of parent from outside authorities instead of listening to and responding to their children. In the early seasons of Buffy, Joyce relies a lot on parenting experts and mentions it a lot. She'll say, all the cassettes tell me that I need to learn to say no. Or, I've read about the dangers of over-nurturing. And then you heard Willow's mom saying, "I've been consulting with my colleagues. They all agree this is a cry for attention, or cry for discipline." Again, as we said with Flutie and Snyder both, the authority is outside rather than there being kind of an intuitive, relationship-based response to what's happening in their lives and in their families. We can say at least that Sheila and Joyce are not willfully evil. They're just misguided. That's not true of all the mothers in the Whedonverse. You might remember Amy body switched with her daughters so that she could relive her glory days as a cheerleader. Or the character of Dennis, who's a ghost in Angel. He was killed, buried alive essentially by his mother to avoid him marrying a woman she didn't approve of. Or Lauren's mom on Angel. Does anyone remember her? It was played by a man. She was horrified that Lauren had come back to his home planet and said, you know, your father was right, we ate the wrong son, and all the neighbors call me the mother of the filthy of the vile excrement. Just heaps of abuse on Lauren, who's such a lovable character. But the fathers are even worse. Buffy's father is absent, Xander's father is a drunk, Angel had been disowned by his father before he ever became a vampire. Wesley's father was physically abusive when he was a child. Cordelia's father was a tax cheat. River's father allowed his child to be tortured by the Alliance, essentially to avoid risking his position, his place of privilege. And then there's the patriarchy. And there's a particularly grim picture of patriarchy in an episode of Firefly called Heart of Gold. Mal and his crew come to the aid of a group of unregistered prostitutes. Inara is friends with the head of this brothel, a woman named Nandi. And one of her prostitutes, Pedaline, is pregnant. And the father of the baby is the petty tyrant in this colony. He's a married man named Rance Burgess. His wife is infertile. And he's staking a claim on this unborn child against the mother's will. And Mal is initially willing to sort of go in as the champion, sort of do the Seven Samurai thing, and battle with Burgess to protect this child until he meets Burgess. And then he doesn't want to deal with him because Burgess is one of the dangerous kind of true believers that he often warns against. This particular family structure, very male-dominated, just comes in for constant critique in the Whedonverse. I'm going to go back to Rance, but even outside the actual literal families in the Whedonverse, there are a lot of characters that play that role. Ted, who dated the robot, who dated Buffy's mom, is very much like that, even though he's sort of a 50s TV sitcom kind of version. He always calls Buffy Little Lady and refers to himself as Daddy, and then when he's crossed, he says, I don't take orders from a woman, I'm not wired that way. Also, there's the mayor of Sunnydale, who also operates out of that sort of superficially kind-hearted, jolly, he calls himself a family man, but of course we know he's deeply, deeply evil. The master from Buffy, of course, on a larger scale, the Shadow Men who created the Slayers, the Watchers Council, Tara's family, where generations of men have been telling the women in the family that they are part demon as a means of maintaining control over them. So if the primary failing of mothers in the Buffyverse is this sort of programmatic parenting that blinds them to the uniqueness of their children and their unique needs, patriarchy is the sin of many of the fathers, those that weren't absent. Yes?
Just a quick question about the mayor. So in his father relationship with Faith, are you saying that wasn't real? Like that he had an agenda for doing that? Or
I think he really did love Faith.
That appears to be the only real relationship that he had, or that perhaps she had.
Yes. And that's one of the things I like about Joss Whedon's shows is that they're so often complicated in ways like that. Because I think he genuinely cared about Faith, and I think Faith genuinely was nurtured by him. And early on, I think the time that he refers to himself as a family man is when she assumes at first that he wants sexual favors from her. And she makes a little joke about him being her sugar daddy, and he's like, no, I don't like that favor. I'm a family man. And from that point on, she knows that he's not treating her that way. He's going to treat her like a daughter. However, he does have an agenda. And the fact is, he does order her to do evil things.
Perhaps like being Hitler's daughter.
Yeah. Yes, even monsters can in some ways be loving. Anyway, back to, that was a good question. Back to what I was saying, if I can get my thoughts back. It's so hot today.
You're doing good.
Okay, this is what Whedon would say is the problem with the patriarchy. It's not just who's above who, but it's this kind of sense of claiming ownership over the female's body and soul. The way that the Shadow Men violated the Slayer, the way that Tara's family insists that she belongs with them even when she doesn't want to go with them, and the way that Burgess demands this baby because it's his baby. In 2007, there was an honor killing of an Iraqi teenager that made it onto the internet because a mob of people were involved in this, and in this day and age, some of them had camera phones. And so they recorded this young woman her offense was that she was dating someone who was part of a different religious minority than she was. They recorded her being kicked and beaten to death. And Joss Whedon posted a blog post called Let's Watch a Girl Being Beaten to Death, and posted it on his site, Whedon-esque. And I would encourage you, go out and find it, because I really love his passion. And this is part of that post, where he kind of gives his own gut reaction that drives a lot of his portrayal of the patriarchy in his work. What is wrong with women? I mean wrong. Physically, spiritually, something unnatural, something destructive, something that needs to be corrected. How did more than half of the people in the world come out incorrectly? I've spent a good part of my life trying to do that math, and I'm no closer to a viable equation, and I've yet to find a culture that doesn't buy into it. Women's inferiority, in fact their malevolence, is as ingrained in American popular culture as it is anywhere they're sporting burqas. I find it in movies, I hear it in the jokes of colleagues, I see it plastered on billboards, and not just the ones for horror movies. Women are weak, women are manipulative, women are somehow morally unfinished. And the logical extension of this line of thinking is that women are, at the very least, expendable. How do we explain the fact that cultures who would die to eradicate each other have always agreed on this one issue? That every popular religion puts restrictions on women's behavior that are practically untenable. That the act of being a free, attractive, self-assertive woman is punishable by torture and death. As you can hear, their religion is implicated in this problem of the patriarchy. I'm trying to tease out these kind of broad categories, and yet they're often bound up together, mutually keeping the status quo in place. And as Dr. Horrible would say, the status is not quo. Back to Burgess from Firefly, because he's such a clear articulation of the patriarchal worldview. The first time that Mal approaches him at a party, just sort of trying to sidle up and find out what kind of a person he is, he overhears part of a conversation in which Burgess is saying, "So I explained to the boy, you take a clean woman's virtue, you take the woman, and that's for life. Boy said his vows right there, then and there. Took very little persuading on my part." You can hear even there the idea that the man owns the woman because of his sexual conquest. And Mal ends up going back to Nandy and the other prostitutes, suggesting that they should run rather than fight, because he says nothing is worse than a monster who thinks he's right with God. In a scene that I almost put in the clips, but I thought it was almost too strong, and I didn't know which of my kids would come to this. None of them today, except my oldest. But after he finds out that Mal and the crew are going to fight on behalf of Petalina and the baby, he sort of rallies the troops. And there's one prostitute who's been feeding him information, and her name is Shari. And this is what he says to his cronies, underlings. Now Shari here, she understands a whore's place, doesn't she? And they all cheer and applaud. But Nandy and those others, they spit on our town. They've no respect for the sanctity of fatherhood, for decency or family. They got my child held hostage to their decadent ways, and that I will not abide. We will show them what power is. We will show them what their position in this town is. Let's all remember right here and now what a woman is to a man. And the scene ends with him, the implication being that he's then forcing Shari to perform a sex act there in front of the crowd. At the end of Heart of Gold, of course, Mal and his crew defeat Rance and a high death toll, including Nandy. Petalina's had her baby in the midst of this, and she comes outside with her newborn son, and Rance is bound on his knees in front of her. She says, "Rance, this is Jonah. Jonah, say hello to your daddy. Say goodbye to your daddy, Jonah." And she lifts a gun and shoots Rance in the head. I would say Joss Whedon never more clearly rejected the patriarchy than with the bullet to Rance Burgess's head. So, again, we gotta ask, is the patriarchy one of our idols? At risk of offending someone in the tent, here are a few lines from a pastor's conference, from a talk given by John Piper.
Do it!
God revealed himself in the Bible pervasively as king, not queen, father, not mother. Second person of the Trinity is revealed as the eternal Son, not daughter. The Father and the Son create man and woman in his image and gave them both the name man, the name of the male. God appoints all the priests in the Old Testament to be men. The Son of God came into the world to be a man. He chose 12 men to be his apostles. The apostles appointed that the overseers of the church be men, and when it came to marriage, they taught that the husband should be the head. Now from all that, I conclude that God has given Christianity a masculine feel. And being God, a God of love, he's done that for our maximum flourishing, both male and female. Well, that's patriarchy. I mean, that's patriarchy. But he says it's for our flourishing, right? Even though Tim Challies, a very high-profile Reformed pastor and blogger this year, reported on his site that he does not even allow women to read scripture in his church. Even though J.I. Packer, who's one of the old saints of the Reformed Church, has said that for a female boss to have a male secretary puts a strain on the humanity of both of them. And the largest church, is there anyone in here from Indiana? Of course there are. Fix this, for God's sake, fix this. The largest church in Indiana is pastored by a man who said it would be a cold day in hell before he would take theology from a woman. First Baptist Church, Hammond, Indiana, Jack Shepp.
We'll go get him.
I love you guys.
Make them listen.
In a Christ-like way. Joss Whedon does not see patriarchy simply as a quirk or a personal preference of the traditional family or of religious communities. It's an evil because it commits the same offense we've talked about in other contexts. It does not honor and attend to women as persons, but sees them as a category, this depersonalized category, subject to control and unfit to make free choices about their paths in life because of their pesky lady parts. So, for Joss Whedon, not only is the family not a refuge from evil, it's often a source of evil. Now we move to the last of our idols, religion. And as you know, we said at the beginning this morning, I'm an associate pastor. I've spent my entire life in the church. I'm the daughter of a pastor. I'm as rooted in church culture as anyone could be. Does Joss Whedon hate me? We watched a clip online where a young Christian man stood up when Joss Whedon was doing a public appearance, and he said, "I just have one question. I'm a Christian. I want to know, why do you hate us?" And Joss Whedon responded, "I don't hate Christians. I just hate you." I found this Christian magazine online, Touchstone, that described Joss Whedon as a dedicated, pro-feminist, environmentally sensitive, gay-friendly, anti-religious, atheistic unbeliever who consciously works to instill these convictions in his audience. On the other hand, the Door magazine, may it rest in peace, in 2002 named Buffy its Theologian of the Year, praising her as someone who could not only deconstruct the problem of evil but kick its hiney. Maybe you've heard the apologetics line, tell me about the God you don't believe in, because I probably don't believe in him either. What I want us to hear is what particular grievances Joss Whedon has with God. He doesn't believe in him, but more than that, he often finds religion threatening. What is it about God that he finds dangerous to us? And let's ask, is that the God we believe in? Is that the God we preach? In the pilot of Firefly, we meet Mal when he is a man of faith, in ways that are just communicated through the scene. He has a cross around his neck, which he kisses before he rushes out into battle. And a few minutes later, they're fighting the Battle of Serenity Valley, clearly against long odds. And the young soldier that is in the trench with him is just paralyzed with fear. His name is Bendis. And he says, hey, listen to me, Bendis. Look at me. Listen, we're holding this valley no matter what. Bendis says, we're going to die. We're not going to die. We can't die, Bendis. You know why? Because we are so very pretty. We are just too pretty for God to let us die. Huh? Look at that chiseled jaw. Huh? Come on. And then you hear planes coming in overhead, and Mal said, if you won't listen to me, listen to that. Those are our angels coming to blow the Alliance to the hot place. But it's not the independent air support. It's more Alliance ships, and Zoe receives the order right at that moment, lay down arms. It's too hot. We're not getting back up. And you see such, Mal just kind of stands up, and Bendis is standing behind him, such shock on his face that it's clear he really did think that help was coming. Whether it was from God or the independents, he's stunned at this defeat. And Bendis is shot over his shoulder, just to kind of add weight to how hopeless this scene is. Bendis is shot and killed behind him. And the next time that we see Mal, he's a changed man. He is no longer a true believer either in God or in fighting for lost causes. He presents himself as interested only in profit and being left alone on the outer edges of civilization. Now, as I've said, Mal does have a moral code, whether he always acknowledges it or not. And his crew slowly draws him back into community. But regardless of the commitments he's able to make to others, his faith in God is gone for good. And he believes if someone is going to act to resist evil, it will have to be humans themselves. In the Safe episode of Firefly, Simon and River have been kidnapped by the residents of a border colony, seeking medical attention from Simon, who is a doctor. And this is a community of religious fundamentalists. When they discover River's unusual psychic abilities, which are a result of the experimentation done on her by the Alliance, they come to the worst possible conclusion, which we can see in clip number 1. Oh, what you can't see is that she's tied to a stake and about to be burned.
Instead, take my life for hers.
That's her brother.
The witch must die. God commands it.
No! Get away from her! She has done nothing to you! If she dies tonight, it won't be God's will that killed her. It'll be you. Your lunacy, your ignorance.
Here, Simon climbs up onto the pyre with River.
It's not going to stop us, Doctor.
Post hole. Digging holes for posts.
He's got his arms wrapped around her.
I did.
Time to go.
And there's Serenity. Jane hanging out the door with Vera, his gun.
What's this? Here's the guy who's just in the nick of time. What does that make us? Big damn heroes, sir. Think we just. Folks, y'all got something that belongs to us, and we'd like it back.
This is a holy cleansing. You cannot think to thwart God's will.
Y'all see the man hanging out of the spaceship with the really big gun? I'm not saying you weren't easy to find. Was kind of out of our way, and he didn't want to come in the first place. Man's looking to kill some folk. So really, it's his will y'all should worry about thwarting. I gotta say, Doctor, sounds really neat, folks. You're miraculous. Yes, I'm very proud. Gun her down.
The girl is a witch.
Yeah, but she's our witch. So cut her the hell down.
Earlier in the episode, despite the fact that they kidnapped Simon and River, the community, this religious community, which is clearly Christian in orientation, had been portrayed fairly sympathetically. But now we see what they are willing to do as a result of their religious beliefs. And over again in the Whedonverse, we find believers who are superstitious, violent, suicidal, tyrannical, and it is their beliefs that make them so. As Mal said of Burgess, nothing is worse than a monster who thinks he's right with God. One of the famous lines from Buffy in the early seasons is, "Note to self, religion freaky." You remember this one? Perhaps more than any other character, Mal represents not just an abhorrence for that kind of fanaticism, but also his atheism, and you hear it there. You're worried about God's will? I've got somebody with a gun on you right now. And then we find the atheism in other places in the Whedonverse. There's a scene where some vampires have raided a church while there are worshipers inside. And one of the angels said, or the vampire says, "I'm stuck." One of them says, "I've been avoiding this place for so many years and it's nothing. It's nice. It's got pretty windows, the pillars, lots of folks to eat. But where's the thing I was afraid of? You know, the Lord." The Whedonverse as a whole is agnostic on the subject of God. This is partly a result of the kind of fiction that it is. Angel, Buffy, they live in worlds occupied with demons and slayers and demigods and powers that be. As to the existence of a Christian God, things are less clear, but when we get closer and closer to the metaphors for Christianity, sometimes they go in this direction, where we see the kind of fanatical behavior that Whedon would warn against. Occasionally it goes in a much more positive direction, as we see with the very Christocentric Buffy season 6 ending, where Xander's love is Xander the Carpenter. His love is what stops Willow from destroying the world.
Can't forget Shepherd Book too.
Yes, and Shepherd Book, there's a lot of mixed signals out there about whether or not Shepherd Book is really a Christian, because there's a lot of Buddhist influences on the show, and the actor himself was a Buddhist. But Joss Whedon said, in fact, that, is it Ron Glass? Do I have that right? That he wanted to have him be a Buddhist, and Joss Whedon said, "No, I want him to be a Christian." And he said, "I like the character, but personally I would disagree with him completely on religion," but he wanted to put that specifically Christian character into that show.
Captain
And
America. Yeah, I was going to say.
What was that?
Captain America?
Yes.
There's only one God, and I'm quite sure he doesn't dress like you.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Yes.
But that would be a nod to the culture from which
Right, from which Captain
came
America
out.
He's a good writer. He'll acknowledge where those people came from.
Right. And he also has said he was very deliberate about making Riley a churchgoer. And that set Riley apart from everyone that Joss Whedon knew in his real life. but that he wanted to have a character for whom religion was not part of his pathology. So even on Firefly, religion is not treated with contempt, really. I mean, Inara is a Buddhist, quite openly a practicing Buddhist, and she prays, and Shepherd Book is a Christian cleric, perhaps a more liberal, progressive model of Christianity than the villagers who nearly burned River. But there is a wonderful scene between Shepherd Book and River that I'm going to have played in just a second. And what you can't see is she's got his Bible, and she's both writing in it and ripping things out as this scene is taking place.
What are we up to, sweetheart?
Fixing your Bible. Contradictions, false logistics, doesn't make sense.
No, you can't.
So we'll integrate non-progressional evolution theory with God's creation of Eden. 11 inherent metaphoric parallels already there. Important number, prime number. One goes into the house of 11 times, but always comes out one. Noah's Ark is a problem.
Really?
We'll have to call it early quantum state phenomenon. The only way to fit 5,000 species of mammal in the same boat.
Give me that. Maybe you don't fix the Bible.
It's broken. Does it make sense?
It's not about making sense. It's about believing in something. And letting that belief be real enough to change your life. It's about faith. You don't fix faith, River. It fixes you. You hang on to those now.
Those are the pages he couldn't get back from her, basically. There's a little short scene later in the episode where she brings those pages back and she wants to return them, and she says, "I tore these out of your symbol and they turned into paper," which I think is a very interesting line about trying to make sense of it out of the context of faith. It just turns into paper. I'm a little rushed for time and we have to get to Jasmine. Somebody asked yesterday about Jasmine. In the 4th season of Angel, there is an exploration of the incarnation of a god. And I would say, again, the parallels to Christianity are intentional. Never mind the convoluted storyline by which Jasmine got there, because season 4 is a little crazy. But when she comes, she's played by Gina Torres, who's Zoe on Firefly. She's beautiful. Everyone who sees her is immediately enthralled by her and falls down in worship. And they find their greatest joy in serving her and being in her presence. She's very kind to everyone. She knows everyone's name. She expresses a desire to bring peace to their broken world. It's not bad. Jasmine, again, is not just any god. You listen to the things that she says, and you can tell he's evoking Christianity. He's invoking Scripture. We'll play this clip quickly, clip 3, and just listen. She is, hold on just one second. Angel has just been expressing concern to her about the evil that he knows, or the potential evil that he has inside him, and what if I'm too happy being with you? And this is her reassuring him.
None of that will matter. Evil will be banished by the deeds we will do, Angel. Even the evil that's inside of you, that too will be gone, and all that will be left is the beauty.
Eradicate all evil.
Yes.
Is that even possible? We've been fighting for so long.
I know. I've seen it all. It's why I've come back. You are my general. I have faith in you.
You have faith in me.
I have faith in all my warriors. each and every one of you. You are all up to the task.
And then this leads to a montage of them fighting demons.
You're not alone anymore. I will be with you everywhere you go. I'll be at your side. Guiding your hands. Giving you strength. With my help, all things are possible. There will be no doubt, no worry, no fear. For you will know you cannot be beaten.
After several weeks. And here's the thing, Jasmine delivers. She provides tremendous social benefits, just as she said she would. Her followers live in harmony with each other. Violence and crime disappears. People appear to be happy. There's a scene in the Jasmine arc which is clearly modeled on a testimony service with people talking about the wonderful difference she's made in their lives. However, Jasmine's beautiful face is an illusion. She's really the devourer from another world, and she is a devourer both literally and figuratively. Her incarnation requires that she consume a handful of people each day, a sacrifice that her blissful followers seem happy to make. And she consumes the personhood and individuation of everyone who sees her. She says there's no room for doubt, only love. And with Jasmine, the cost of salvation is the freedom to choose otherwise. Fred is the first person to see her true face, and Fred is immediately out of the community. I mean, the Wesley, who loved her, is warning people away from her, saying that Fred is trying to drive them onto the rocks of heresy and destruction. It is impossible to watch this arc, for me, without wondering if this is how the church looks to Joss Whedon or looks to some others from the outside. Do we appear to be surrendering judgment and personhood for the sake of a blissed-out enslavement? Do we seem to be worshiping a God who will save us from ourselves only by destroying what makes each of us distinct? What does an atheist hear when we talk about surrendering our wills? Or we have a chorus we sing at church sometimes, asking God to consume me from the inside out. What does that sound like outside the church, for that matter? What do we mean when we sing it? So now we come back, and I'm running along, I'm going to be really fast, but we come back to that question we started with. Is the God Joss Whedon rejects the same God that we worship, or the God we present to the world? Is this a God who we say will protect his people, but who is absent in the moment of crisis, as Mal found? Is it a God who demands the repression of half the human race as somehow defective? Is it a God who inspires blind fanaticism in his or her followers? Is it a God whose love is conditioned on the cessation of all doubts and questions? Does devotion to him require being devoured? Jasmine is a moral monster, ultimately, but no worse than some of the articulations of Christian theology that I've heard in my lifetime. And that is as specific as I will get without offending particular strains of Christian tradition. I'm going to stop there. Tomorrow we're going to switch gears and talk about Joss Whedon's moral philosophy. What does he believe leads to the good and virtuous life? And what do we do in the struggle against evil? If by any chance you have questions, critiques, arguments, I'll be outside the tent. Thank you.